Now hold up! Don't you... just give me a minute here, alright? I'm not saying you all think the Patreon will save anime, don't worry. Please, do me this courtesy.
Listen to my voice, listen to my heart.
Quell your objections for now, open your hearts and more importantly your ears, leave your preconceptions at the door to the insight I shall provide here. Don't worry, you can pick them back up on your way out. So, after a long period of requests and speculation, the Mad Lads have finally gone and done it. Studio Trigger has launched their Patreon. Now, I've actually been privy to this for a good while. For the year leading up to it, I'd been posting the link to the Patreon account around for laughs. Exhibit A on screen for those of you who, for some strange reason, lack much faith in the truthfulness and accuracy of most anime YouTubers. Now imagine that one. In less than 2 weeks here, Trigger is sitting pretty with the 128th most pledged to Patreon on the platform, a number which I'm sure will shift between writing this and actually editing the video, so thanks for that. They're making just about 9,000 sweet USDs a month here, and so the question naturally becomes, what for? Here's where we get past my jokey rambling preamble and into the real stickiness of the situation, since what exactly this is for has a myriad of answers, and this wide-ranging set of explanations of the purpose of this Patreon brings up a number of issues. To start with the simplest of those answers, we look to Trigger's stated purpose on their Patreon page itself. Picking out everything here that could be taken as an explanation of the Patreon's purpose. At times, we wished we had an extra buck or two. There's been one too many incidents where we had to give up a merchandising idea because it was unprofitable, or simply due to lack of funding. That's where you and Patreon comes in. With your support, we would like to forward funds into various aspects of the studio. Possibly a new line of merchandise, conducting more events, or simply providing a little more to our staff. They then go on to say, we hope to return to the community by providing more opportunity to our fanbase. As stated earlier, there's been several incidents where we had to drop merchandise project due to lack of initial funding. Our initial goal is to prepare streaming equipment so that we can occasionally conduct a live drawing session or other events involving our creators. Once our community grows, we hope to introduce more ways to involve our fans. The big thing that comes up seems to be that the Patreon will allow them to make merchandise in instances where they want to do so but can't because it wouldn't necessarily be profitable. That one comes up more times and with more detail than any other explanation, so stands out as a main purpose or objective. In addition to asking for your pledge to enable such merchandise initiatives, they also mention attending or conducting more events, providing more of the fairly vague opportunity to their fans, getting streaming equipment, and, quote, simply providing a little more to our staff. At face value, this isn't terrible. They've got some side initiatives they'd like to have the financial breathing room to engage in. If you like that idea, you can support them. A few hazily worded goals are a bit concerning, especially the staff one, since vaguely gesturing towards perhaps helping the staff out with this money when there's such a strong desire to help alleviate the plight of grossly underpaid animators feels a bit exploitative of that desire to help. However, you can chalk that up to those implications not quite being understood on the Japanese side of things, and say that this is a fair, solid Patreon page. Now let's look at some of those other answers to the question of what its purpose is. You see, unfortunately there's been years of build-up for the concept of the studio Patreon in the collective conscious of Western anime fans. Digibro has been one of the most emphatic proponents of this on a large scale, and given the fact that this Patreon probably came about in decent part because of studio fans constantly bringing it up and requesting it, this might be something he could take a bit of credit for. It's just that the reasons he, and by extension a good number of people, wanted a Trigger Patreon to exist don't really line up with the reason it does exist. Perhaps the primary issue looking to be addressed was how inefficient spending money on anime is. What percentage of your Crunchyroll subscription goes back to the people who made the show? No, not the companies who made it, the people. A minuscule amount of it in all likelihood. And to be clear, this is not some particular malice on the part of Crunchyroll, it's a result of the way the industry at large operates, which means that this is a widespread issue. That same minuscule amount of most anime spending, be it on merch or Blu-rays, actually makes it back to the people who made that anime you love. There was a simple desire to cut out the middleman, to be able to hit a button and send your money directly to those people and, minus the small processing fee, have that money actually reach them. This is where the disconnect seems to be taking place though, because you aren't sending your Patreon money to Hiroyuki Imaishi or Yo Yoshinari or Hayao Miyazaki, you're sending it to the company, Studio Trigger. Dig a little deeper, think a bit more critically. Why do you want to send money directly to those people who created an anime you love? Is it to enable them to create more? Is it to give them some extra cash? A sort of, hey, you made this great piece of art, you deserve some spending money, go treat yourself gesture. Why specifically do you want to send them that money? And I ask this so insistently because once you have that why, you can start to look at if this Patreon would actually accomplish that purpose. Will this Patreon give Trigger more freedom to make anime projects? If you like the anime they've made, is this Patreon a good way of enabling them to do more of that? Simply put, no. Let's put this in perspective. In the Kickstarter for the Little Witch Academia 2 OVA, the stated goal was to be able to expand it from the 20 minutes they could afford and had planned by adding 15 minutes to the OVA's runtime. To accomplish this goal, they were asking for $150,000. Now obviously some of that was allocated for fulfilling the physical rewards and such. Unfortunately, we don't have one of those charts giving an exact spending breakdown like many Kickstarters do, but this does still tell us a lot. Ignoring Patreon's cut, Trigger is set to make about $108,000 in a year, which is certainly nothing to scoff at. However, with that Kickstarter number in mind, we can see that all that money, if solely devoted to animation funding, would fund around 15 minutes of animation. This lines up pretty neatly with existing cost estimates that we've had, which put the cost of one standard episode of TV anime at around $150,000 to produce. Specifically, one of these sources straight up says a single episode costs around $150K, and the other says that a 13-episode series costs around $2 million, which, when divided by 13, is right around that same $150,000 mark. You simply will not enable anything of note with any effectiveness through this Patreon. So if that is your goal or desire, know that this just isn't an initiative that will fulfill those. Now, for plenty of you, I'm sure this is not your goal, that you already knew this would not enable that. Please keep in mind here that by disproving a given reason for pledging, I'm not trying to own you in some way or suggest all supporters are idiots who thought this would work. I realize these things can get touchy, so I want you to know that you can be at ease. Mommy will only touch you in the good places. Moving on, let's address the idea of Trigger's Patreon as a means of supporting the individuals behind the studio. It's a wrong-headed one. There's almost nothing in the mission statement to suggest that if you'd like to buy Hiroyuki Imaishi a beer as thanks for all the great Gamagori Mako dojins he spawned, this Patreon is an effective means of doing that. The only goal that would ever let him see any of the Patreon money would be that vague, or simply providing a little more to our staff goal. But really, I'd hope that he'd be one of the last to see it in that case. The higher level staff, directors, producers, writers, and what have you, generally make a solid wage. Not something that extravagant in most cases, but a livable wage. Unlike lower level staff who by and large make a wage that literally isn't enough to survive off of. Around half of young animators receive financial assistance from their families. And over half of them who aren't living in their parents' house say that they have greatly cut into their savings while working in the anime industry. Some people say that it's naive to get into the industry expecting to make much money, and that these animators either do, or at the very least should, go into things expecting to make sacrifices in order to pursue making art as a career. But there's a difference between accepting a lower standard of living to pursue your passion, and the industry standard being a refusal to give its workers enough money to live. 80% of animators quit within their first 3 years because they can no longer afford expenses or they're experiencing burnout from the workload. Which is insane when you consider the fact that there is a noted and dramatic labor shortage in the anime industry that constantly gets brought up whenever someone is asked about the state of that industry. So yeah, valid soapboxing done here. There's other people who should, in my humble, more informed, well-researched opinion, be getting that money first, so that they can, afford to eat. And of course, moral reasons for why supporting the Patreon shouldn't be an effective means of tossing cash at your favorite trigger director aside, there is also that practical fact that the possibility of giving money to any staff is extremely vague, and so not at all reliable for achieving that end. And that's the thing, because this plight is so severe, there is a powerful desire to be able to help relieve it in some capacity. We've seen that charitable desire put to good use with initiatives like the Animator Dormitory Project, as well as less than good, by which I mean bad, use with entities like the Flying Colors Foundation and Otaku Coin, which, especially in the latter case, have used help support animators in the industry as a buzz phrase to attract attention and support from people, while they provide very few details about how their initiatives would actually accomplish that at all. Because of all this, some people see this Patreon as an opportunity to help, to avoid those middlemen and get money to the studio directly so it can support its staff. And I mean, the prospect of having fans support them to get staff properly paid itself would already be a tad eyebrow-raising from a studio as well-connected as Trigger is, and how weak its support system for its staff is relative to other studios in its industry that have active programs to improve things. But we don't even need to worry about that, because as I just laid out, this Patreon does not effectively serve the purpose of getting staff better paid either. How about if you care less about the specific individuals, if you just want to give money to Trigger as an entity? My question in that case would have to be, why? We've already established that doing so won't in any meaningful capacity mean you get more anime from them. It would take over a decade of their current Patreon support to fund a feature film. Do you just literally want to have sent money to the studio as some largely symbolic show of support? This is a company, you realize, right? When discussing this with some people, they've argued that they don't ask for specific spending breakdowns from the people they support on Patreon. They appreciate the work those people make, and so give them money to live their lives as they see fit, which is perfectly fair. It's how I operate myself. Hey there, I'm about to move from one United States coast to the other, / just did that. How about you help a girl out? Patreon.com/thepedanticromantic. Thanks, hon. But surely you can appreciate the massive glaring difference in scale there. You are giving money to a person, and in all but the top-tier cases, that person is still only making a solid, moderately above-average amount of money. On the scale of someone my size, pledges allow me to live, and on the scale of someone more like a ContraPoints, pledges allow that person to live comfortably. If even after all of this, your stance remains, no, I just want to toss some money into the mechanical maws of this successful corporate entity with an international audience and partnership with two of its industry powerhouses, then I really can't argue against you further because your reasoning is so bizarre and alien to me that I legitimately cannot begin to understand it. But, needless to say, I think you're mistaken. Moving on from wrong-headed reasons many people have for wanting to support the Patreon, and then incomprehensible reasons, we do finally come to the good reasons to do so. Yes, they exist. I laid out that you can patron someone to allow them to live or live better, but you can do so for more selfish motivations as well, for the rewards. I do this myself, in fact. I'm pledged to a Dick Show Patreon that makes plenty of money just because I need more dick in my ears, courtesy of the Patreon-exclusive bonus episodes. A number of people have argued that they're pledging because they want the live draw streams, along with access to all the various arty files you can get as a Patreon. And if that's your reasoning, more power to you. You're seeing a product you desire and paying what it costs to get your hands on it. Oh, my apologies. Did I say good reasons to support the Patreon? Sorry, that should have been good reason. There's only one. If they reveal some specific merchandise this Patreon would allow for, that might be another decent reason to pledge, but currently there's so little info on what merch you'd actually be empowering that I can't call that a good reason to do so. So to recap, if you want to do any of the following, fund Trigger anime productions, get money into the hands of any beloved Studio Trigger staff member, get money into the hands of the many underloved Studio Trigger staff members, or help the anime industry in any capacity really, pledging to the Trigger Patreon is a bad idea as it will not assist in any of those desires. If you want to do any of the following, give money to the company itself for no purpose, you are crazy. If you want to get access to the rewards, and only if you want those rewards, is it actually a good idea to support this Patreon. This video is here in decent part as a simple PSA, to lay out what Trigger's stated purpose with their Patreon is, and how that does or does not fulfill hopes for it that fans had been building up for over a year now. I think Trigger has been unclear at points, but it has not been actively deceptive here, so as long as the time is taken to look into things a bit and then reason them out, we can see what this project is currently aiming to accomplish, and thus if it warrants our support. There are people for whom this Patreon is definitely a good idea, but I think those who are just betting on fan involvement that is extremely vague in nature should be waiting for more details before they back that. I understand that the internet, and Patreon specifically, has gotten us accustomed to a, oh, you make stuff I like, here, have some money mentality, and in many cases that's a good thing, but a second thought should be given before extending those instincts to an established, well-off company. Normally you're giving Patreon support to a creator to enable them to create that work of theirs that you love, and even for those who can already survive off of their income, there's at least decent reason to believe that putting them in a slightly better place financially through your contribution could help them in making that art.
And if I was giving money to Trigger, I would know, hey, I'm giving my money to the people who make the shows I like. That's where the money's going. I don't even need a product. The product is the show. I don't want a Blu-ray of Little Witch Academia. I just want to pay them to make Little Witch Academia.
However, at the scale Trigger operates at, there is simply no reasonable assumption to be made that this Patreon support will in any meaningful capacity help them make more of the stuff you love of theirs. This is not some random creator's Patreon page, and it will not assist the studio in creating anime. For something more in that vein, I'd recommend the Patreon of animator Raparu, who is aiming to make a short film in the style of those that they've done previously, and who will be assisted in that goal by having some income from that Patreon to give them the free time to work on that film. And of course, beyond just them, there are many other industry members with Patreon pages to support as well. I hope you come away from this more informed, and that whatever decision you make in terms of supporting the Patreon, whatever light you now view the initiative in, is one you can truly be confident in, now having considered all these thoughts on the matter. This was a process of me compiling all the arguments I've seen, along with all the ones I could come up with. So even though I'm not normally one of those, hey, let me invent some reason for you to talk in the comments and boost my video's engagement numbers type of person, you're welcome by the way, you will now be noticing that tactic everywhere if you weren't already woke to it, I'd genuinely appreciate you putting your own examples of why someone might have good reason to support the Patreon, or more reasons people have given for why they're supporting it that you think have notable holes in them. I think in the anime community here, we're all very much in this together when it comes to slowly trying to build a better understanding of how things work, and this video is just my personal contribution towards trying to reach that understanding on this subject. Hey, it's me, I'm back again. I stayed up all night editing a video again. I am functional. I hope you enjoyed. It's a video I like. I hope you like it. I have to say other things. Oh, pledge my Patreon, please. Thank you. What else? Pledge to Raparu's Patreon. Thank you, people already pledged to my Patreons. I got a list of you right here. Psyker, Car Keys, Mathways97, Jonathan Conley, Skylar Morrow, Tyler Monk, Sakamoto Mio, Teen Show 37, Josh Grant, Lord Liquid Bacon the Third. It's actually the second, I think, but it's a typo, and we left it because it's like an inside joke. Okay, Stella Luna, Elaine Altfelt, Darian De Sotel, David McCown, Kieran Rice, Hajort Dog, Matt Bekelder, Smokeweed Sephiroth 420, J-Man 4747, everyone else. Thank you a lot. Do I have time? Should I say anything else? No.